Why are you not becoming a doctor or a real journalist? Yeah, I think for as many Asian parents, I think take a while to kind of get on board with any of our careers that are outside of the normal vocations. I was blown away at what women are doing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. This is a partnership with Meta Prosper Creators Podcast. And I'm very excited because we have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Ami Desai. As an Indian American born during the 80s, Ami grew up with a generation that deeply felt the need for more South Asian representation in the media world. She started her career behind the camera field, producing for several news magazine shows, including Inside Edition and CNN. It was her time on red carpets and behind the camera where she discovered her passion for on-camera hosting and landed her dream opportunity hosting the first digital show for Oprah.com. Simultaneously working in media, she started building her own beauty business as well as her family. She established herself as one of the first South Asian content creators to work with household brands like Toyota and Pampers for large campaigns, while highlighting important Indian traditions and holidays like Diwali. She also serves as a regular contributor on The Today Show. Ami's ultimate goal is to bring together her experience as a host, makeup artist, and mom to help other women like herself prioritize and advocate for themselves while fulfilling different roles. Ami, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me for that lovely intro.
Of course, that's very impressive. And I'm very excited to get to know you today and just have you on the show to share your story. So, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, Ami? Did you always have this kind of creative and entrepreneurial side to you while growing up?
I think I definitely always had this itch inside of me and this yearning to be creative. But I think, like many Asian households, it was very sort of like you're going to do something or pursue a path or vocation that we know is going to bring success because obviously a lot of our parents, my parents included, emigrated from India in the 60s and they worked really hard to make a life for myself and my brother. And then in doing so, they saw what working as a doctor or a lawyer or themselves, they were engineers. And my brother's a cardiologist. So, for them, they were like, okay, this is it. This is what you got to do. And I was very, very at an early age. I loved like writing. I loved producing things whenever we'd have to do like, you know, video content, especially I remember when that started becoming something for those that don't know, but back in like, the 90s and 2000s when that was just starting to become something like video and broadcast journalism, I took to that immediately and I knew I wanted to pursue that. But so it was just so hard because even now, today, we hear you hear minority groups like Asians and South Asians talk about how there's not enough representation. You can only imagine, right, what that was like 40 years ago. There really was no representation. So I had no idea where to start. I just knew I wanted to do something that I saw other people doing that didn't look like me. And I was just like, how am I going to do that? I'm going to have to figure this out. And hopefully there's going to be a path for me to express that and actually do it.
Yeah, and that's very courageous of you, to be able to do something that you don't really see maybe like on TV or on stage a lot, right? And for you to kind of be that trailblazer, it inspires other people that are in the younger generation as well. And yeah, I would just say that's very courageous to be that kind of like that first person to do it. But yeah, I love that you shared that. So thank you so much. You started your career in broadcast journalism, working
Mhm.
for notable companies such as Inside Edition and CNN. Do you feel like this helped you kind of build a foundation for you to start creating content?
Oh, 100%. One of the biggest things I always say is even though I wish like I would have maybe started content creating and social media right at the brink of like when Facebook started, I think I was in grad school at that time and I was like, what's Facebook? And so, that and then and at that time it was just sharing on platforms. It wasn't necessarily creating content. But I remember when I started doing specifically like Instagram and I remember thinking like, gosh, had I started doing that then, because I think I officially really started my career in it when I was around 35 or 36. So like 2017. And one thing that I take away from when I talk to younger generations about starting in this space is really getting your hands wet in every aspect of media or social media, be it, right? So, like learning how to gather content, learning how to do lighting, how to do sound, all of it. And that's one thing I will never, ever be upset about, like taking time to get where I was, because I'll tell you, it's invaluable. Being able to be a one man band, as we used to call it, like when I was in journalism school, there is nothing like it. And it paid off in spades and during times like COVID, when we were secluded and we couldn't do things, and sets couldn't be available. I would do a lot of UGC deals that were really great and really big with some amazing companies that needed someone that could not only direct, but create content, write scripts, edit, do my own hair and makeup. Right? I mean, there's all these things that I realized, like, gosh, I have these skill sets and all these different things. And the reason I have that is because I did work behind the scenes in various companies like Inside Edition. I was on the field producing, right? So you're constantly trying to figure out like what the angle is of the story, trying to grab that big piece of content that's going to make the headline for the segment tomorrow. Or at CNN, I was working like the Middle East crisis desk at that time. I mean, there's so many things that you just take away when you're actually on the ground or on the field that is irreplaceable. And you can never just learn that, sitting down behind a desk, but like getting your hands fully immersed in all of it. And so I always tell people I'm like, do it all. Like, I understand you want to be the creator, you want to be the one that's creating the content, you have all the ideas, but put that into play. Like, go produce it yourself, write the script, go ask someone to help you shoot, and or don't be afraid to ask people also for help on like, hey, how do I get my lighting to look like that? I there's so many times where I will go onto other creators content and I'm like, I love the way this setup is, can you just tell me like what camera are you using? Or if you don't mind sharing, like what's your best tip and practices for getting that perfect lighting when you're doing beauty you know videos. And they'll tell me, and sometimes they will and sometimes they won't, but it never hurts to ask. So getting your hands wet and never being afraid to ask is like
Absolutely.
biggest things I
Absolutely.
learned.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that we see a lot of content creators who, a lot of us, when we're watching their content, we feel like, oh my gosh, it seems like they blew up overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the actuality is that they probably had years and years of experience. Maybe they were in broadcast journalism before, or they were on YouTube before for 5, 10 years, just kind of perfecting their craft. And you can tell when people are putting out really good quality content, right? Rather than just kind of like just doing anything without a script. And to produce good content, you do have to be prepared and you do have to have a script. And that's why we see so many successful creators have so much preparation and so many years of practice until they're really able to like kind of nail it down and figure out what their niche is.
So I agree with that totally. And I think you and I probably both come from that same school of thought of like being
Mhm.
prepared and doing all of these things. I feel like now you do have to break away from that a little bit, because only because if you try and say that too much, what happens is people get scared to then try, right? Because they're like, I'm not prepared because I didn't go to broadcast journalism school. I didn't do this and I don't have the field experience. At that same time, it's like, it's almost great to just, if you truly have a passion for something and you truly have a voice and you know that there's a void for it, like for when I was starting out, especially in social media, I knew that there weren't moms my age that looked like me that were trying to exemplify or demonstrate or share the struggles of what it was like to be a new mom and trying to work and do this and XYZ. And that was the void, and that's what was my impetus for doing all the things I was doing. And so it was very clear what I wanted to do, and then I just kind of learned the ropes and I did it myself, right? But I think that's the big thing too, is remembering that even if people have years and years of experience, that doesn't mean that you can't start with no experience and learn from your mistakes as you're going along and doing it. And also it's important to remember too that if you and I think that, oh my gosh, well, they just blew up and that's just how it happens, like life goes beyond those nine squares that we see. Because I think a lot of times, especially now, it's just so easy to judge and assume things by the first things you see on anybody's social media page. And it's just not true, right? Like nobody knows, aside from sometimes when someone will be like, oh my God, I listened to this podcast you did. I had no idea that you had years of journalism experience and that you actually worked in TV and you did this. I just thought you were someone that enjoyed doing makeup on Instagram and then that's how you started. I'm like, no, that's not. So I think there's just so much there. It's like taking what you learn from other people and realizing that it's not always what you
Right.
see, but then also don't be afraid of just because you see someone that's successful in doing things that you can't start doing them too.
Right. Right. And I think that's why there's such a beauty in like content creation today because it is changing a little bit, right? Whereas like you need to have like a happy medium where if
Hmm.
you kind of think of something on the spot, those are the most like natural conversations and the natural thoughts. And I feel like they're the most relatable, right? But you still have to
Hmm.
kind of put some effort into making sure your lighting is good. So that's not all
For sure.
dark, right? But then also making sure that the conversations feel natural and it's on the spot. Like some of the on the spot conversations feel the most relatable. So definitely has to have like a happy medium there.
And to your point, prepared. I think the
Exactly.
difference is like it's being prepared, but it's also being organized, right? So it's like,
Absolutely.
and strategizing. I think that's the part where I'm like, yeah, it's not like somebody, it can be for some, but it's not like you just wake up and you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to create this. I think the beauty of content creation is that it looks like it's very fluid and it's so easy and it looks like, oh, I'm just making coffee every day and I'm just doing this, whatever your content is on social media, but there's a strategy behind it, right? And
Right.
that's what I think is really interesting when people look at it like and take a deep dive into it and want to do it themselves. It's like I think for me, I remember when I was graduating college, I was really close to either going into the retail side
Hmm.
of being like in marketing or a buyer. And then I remember when I got to that level and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so many numbers. It's all crunching numbers. This is not like Rachel Green on Friends, this is not what that job is. And so I think it's the same thing with when people actually take a stab at doing content creation, they're like, this is hard. Like, this is crazy. You're studying your analytics, you're checking your engagement, you're figuring how to pitch to people. There's a lot of strategy behind it. So 100%, like being prepared and being strategic is super important with everything that you do.
Absolutely. So I know that you touched a little bit upon finding your niche and
Mm-hmm.
that you realized that there was a gap in the content creation space. But before we get into that, I want to kind of go in chronological order.
Yeah.
Um, you hosted a show on Oprah.com and went
Yes.
on tour with Oprah Winfrey. Tell us, how did that all happen? And you can share, just like the beginning of it, how that opportunity kind of landed on you. And yeah, tell us the whole
Yeah.
story.
So I think there was a time when I was producing at Inside Edition at the time, and I kind of hit a crossroads. I was about 26, 27, and I kind of took a step back. And I had been married for 2 years. My husband, who was my then college boyfriend, and I got married, and I was like, I see so many women around me working their butts off. And at this time, this was at the advent of like 24/7 news. So it wasn't, but entertainment news, so it was like you had TMZ, Perez Hilton, you had all those outlets out there. So I would be on call on weekends. And I was like, this is really hard. And I took a step back and I was like, do I want to be doing this? Like, I think I want to start a family soon. And every woman I worked with at that time was about 6, 7 years older than me, and nobody had children. So I was like figuring out what I wanted to do, which I think there comes a crossroads with all women, especially that we kind of step back and like, what am I doing? How do I do this? Do I do both at the same time? So I took a step back and I ended up starting like my own beauty business because that is something that I really was passionate about. Has always been beauty. And so I started doing that. And then randomly, I got a call from one of my girlfriends who was a producer at Inside Edition. She's like, my husband works for OWN and they're working on this new show. It's going to be the first digital show for Oprah Winfrey. Like, do you want to test for it? And I was like, what? Yes. And the testing process was quite long. So I started testing for that in 2011. I had my first baby and then I was pregnant again with my second when we started actually like going to air. So it was one of those really, you have no idea how long things take to create and develop, especially at that time. Digital was brand new. We were taping at YouTube Space. It was such a cool experience because this was when YouTubers were becoming so big. And so they went in and filmed things. And it was an amazing experience because it taught me a lot just about digital media and hosting, being in front of a camera, like being quick with live TV and doing all that. I also met some amazing people. One of my co-hosts was Karamo Brown, who is obviously Queer Eye, and he has his own show now. And I mean, he's like, it's awesome. It's amazing to see what he has done. But I just remember us being so giddy when we first got that job. And to see like, where he's gone, what we've done in our careers is pretty awesome.
Oh my goodness. Well, congratulations on
Thank
all of the
you.
success. That's so amazing. And Oprah, I'm sure, is an amazing human being to
Oh,
work with and for. She's so admirable. And I also read that your parents got to meet Oprah,
oh yeah.
and I heard that they watched her religiously their entire lives as well. Can you tell us what your parents thought about this whole experience for you?
Yeah, I think for as many Asian parents, I think take a while to kind of get on board with any of our careers that are outside of the normal vocation. I think they thought what I was doing was kind of like, oh, that's cute. Yeah, that's cute. Oh, that's cute. You're doing something with TV and I don't know what you're doing and you're producing something and this content. And I think it was when I'd gotten that show, they were like, "Wow, this is a big deal." And then I think when they saw me get asked to do like a tour with her, and then they'd see content of me like with Gail King or like with Deepak Chopra or like doing these really cool interviews, they were like, "Oh wait, like this is real." I'm like, "Yeah." And then I remember I had the opportunity to invite them to a show. And they got to meet her. And I think that was at the point where they were like, wow, you're this, okay, we get it now. We see what you're doing. And that was such a full circle moment for me because I think especially just being female, South Asian. There were so many things that I feel like fighting for so many years, which is so interesting because I have two parents that were full time engineers, um, a mom that was very progressive. But even then, it was still very much like, okay, go ahead and pursue your passions, but just make sure you marry someone that can take care of you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I felt like this was something that, it was like, okay, I made you guys proud. Like I did that, I'm doing it. And now I'm showing you that, I can make your dreams come true too. Every day my mom would watch Oprah when she'd come home, she'd have it like, at that time we didn't have DVR, but however it was, or maybe it's just on the weekends, but she'd always have the show on. So that was really, really awesome.
That's amazing. And I think that's totally normal that your parents said that to you. I feel like especially in Asian or South Asian households, like for example, my mother, she was a
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom, and my father, he was the only one who was working. So for myself and my sisters, we were kind of taught like, oh yes, go to college, get a well-paying job until you retire at the age of 65, or find a husband who can take care of
Right.
you, right? And so it's just so different now, like I feel like a lot of our parents don't understand how we make money nowadays because we're living in a different generation. Obviously, there's so many new ways to make money. And for them, they kind of understand the only safe routes to go is just to become an engineer, lawyer, doctor. But we have so many creative passions and creative paths that we can take now. So it's definitely a very different generation that, I think they're just trying to look out for us
I
because that's
agree.
all they know, right?
Of course, it's them trying to say we don't want to set you up. We want to set you up for success and not failure because they work so hard to do that, right? And I can even see that now as I raise my own children, who are starting to develop interests in certain things. And I'll be like, oh, wait, you want to be a basketball player? Are you sure you want to be an actress? Like, wait, are you sure you don't want to go into something like a little bit more creative? Or, and then you hear now how difficult it is to get into college and these things. And I'm like, do you want to be a YouTuber? We can start a page on like, aspirate like inspirational videos for teens. And, all these things are in my head. And I'm like, Ami, stop pushing yourself onto your children. Like, they're going to be great. They're going to do amazing things. And so I can now understand and see where my parents were coming from and what their intent was. Although at the time I was like, guys, come on, like not, I'm not just going to get married and be taken care of, even though that's fine too. If somebody
Yeah.
wants that. And I think the beauty about that too, from what you were saying is, um, even if that was what somebody thought they should do because they were maybe, encouraged to do that, like go to college, go to school, get your education, and then get married and raise kids. That's number one, and that's really important. I think the beauty about all of this is that you can now. There's no limit, right? So you can start this career in social media at 40, at 50, at 60. And that's what I think is truly inspiring is you see people that are creating these amazing careers and living out their true passions later in life. Whereas I think when I was right out of college or when I was in my mid 20s, I was like, if I'm not there at 32, done. Life is over.
Hmm.
Life is
Yeah.
over because I'm going to be driving a minivan. I'm going to be a mom, and no one is going to want to hire me
Right.
for whatever it might be. And obviously, that whole tune has changed. And it's great to see because it's also just really inspiring that it's never too late.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this term in my culture, in the Chinese culture, called like expired, like when a woman turns a certain
Yes,
age, like you're not good for anything anymore for
right.
marriage or for career. But I see so many stay-at-home moms making content nowadays, and I love that for them, right? Like I think if you want to become a stay-at-home mom, I'm all for that. But they're also making money and income on their end and making sure that they can, you know, just provide for themselves, right? I
And
I
it's not
love
just
that so
pennies.
much.
And it's
It's
not
not.
just
It's
pennies,
not. You're right.
Like
Right.
you go to some of these conferences and you go to, I was just at like the LTK con last year, and it was my first time going to the conference. And I was blown away at what women are doing and their stories. And like, they were like, yeah, I was raising two kids at home and now I am making seven figures and my husband doesn't work. Like he works for me, and it's awesome. It's so amazing to hear. And even like when I talk to friends who still sometimes be like, I don't really know what you do. And then I'll be like, hey, come sit with me for half a day and understand like the office side, the creative side to the like actual execution. I'm like, what you see is like maybe a fun little skit or like, yeah, I'm going over a review on a beauty product, but there's so much that goes into it. And um just like what your job might be, right? In whatever field you're in, it's like it all has the same application to it if you're trying to monetize it and
Yeah,
make it a career. So
absolutely. So I would love to kind of talk about your content creation journey now. After wrapping up your role hosting with Oprah, I know that you noticed there was like a rise of platforms targeting mom content. Talk about that kind of
yeah.
transition and how you were able to differentiate yourself in your content. Because I'm sure at the time there wasn't a lot of content creators creating content in that specific
Yeah.
specific topic. But how did you want to kind of make yourself unique, right? Because I'm sure that there were some other mom content, but like how were you able to make yourself differentiate yourself from others?
Yeah. So I think what happened was when I was on the OWN show and I was taping at YouTube Space, I would observe a lot of other YouTubers. And I was like, okay, this is what they're doing and this is how they do it. Maybe I can do that. And I was kind of picking up and talking to people, asking questions. And at the same time, simultaneously, because I came from the TV world, I was asking a lot of producers and a lot of casting people, like, hey, like, what about a pitch for like a mom makeover show? Or what about this? Like, I know what it's like being a new mom, but I just feel like there's not enough around this. And I remember the number one thing that I would get told was, love the idea. Just we don't think there's enough around the mom space. Like they're like, it's just not there. We don't have enough people that are aspiring. It's not aspirational. People don't want to see the mom thing. And that was in 2016. Okay. So I remember I was like, wow, really? That's crazy because I feel like if there was a channel or there was someone talking to me about like how to take a 2-minute shower with your newborn baby or like how to go grocery shopping with two kids under two, I would be all over that because I'm in that position and I have no clue how to do it. But I remember I started getting asked questions like, you're still taping this show and you're 9 months pregnant and you have a 2-year-old at home. How are you doing this? How are you finding time to curl your hair? How are you like doing that? And I'm like, oh, I was like, okay, let me tell you, like, there are things that if it's important to you, you're going to wake up and do. For me, my therapy was like being able to wash my hair and blow dry it, right? So I would wake up 30 minutes earlier. I would do certain things that allowed me to do those things. And I think it was just like sharing that I realized I have to show it before I can actually get it, make it believable to people to pick up and say, like, hey, that content is something that's good. So I literally realized after a year of trying to pitch myself, people didn't want to read ideas anymore and they didn't want to like pick up projects. They wanted to see the results. So they wanted to see that there was traction, engagement, people were actually wanting more of that. So I created a channel and I remember I think one of my first videos was like, get ready with me in 5 minutes with a toddler, or it was like my 18-month old and then I was like getting ready, or it's like get ready in 5 minutes doing this. And that just slowly built. It wasn't overnight, and there was definitely not like, oh wow, 5 million views. I remember I think I decided to do like, oh, one of my biggest things was, how to save time as a new mom. Because for me, one of the biggest things was I was like, I can't leave the house all the time. I didn't have help immediately. So like for the first year or so, I was on my own and I was figuring out like, but wait, I need to get my hair done or I want to get this done or I want to do that. So I started figuring out ways because I had a big passion for beauty of doing things at home. So I remember it was threading. I learned how to thread and I did my eyebrows and I did a video on that. And that did well because I think that was a huge thing that people wanted to know. And I was like, okay, these are the things that I think kind of gel together. It's like the umbrella of being a mom and everything under it, right? So for me, that was kind of when I realized what my focus was very much around everything under that mom space. And does that align with me? So it could be beauty, it could be fashion, it could be food, but is it like, hey, let's do this red carpet look, but we're going to do it in 10 minutes or less because that's what time we have as mothers, or make a fast meal in 10 minutes or less because that's what we have time for. And so then I think that's how I started focusing a lot more. And I think, you'll get lots of advice too on how you should create content and what you should focus on. And one of the biggest things that people told me when I would ask like strategy consultants and stuff, a lot of their things were you got to focus on one thing, like do beauty as a new mom. And I was like, you know what? But that just doesn't really embody to me what a new mom is because we really do try and wear different hats. We kind of have ADHD a little bit. I'm like, I'm
Right.
cooking, I'm getting ready, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. So I was like, I kind of want to be really true to myself and show that. And they're like, okay, but your progress is probably just going to be, your rise is going to be more slow and steady than it is fast. And again, I think that's something that you as a creator have to decide of do you want it quick and fast or are you okay with kind of the slow climb and getting to know your audience and your demo and growing with them, which I really enjoy because at the end of the day, for me, I know the people I'm speaking to, it's almost like they're my little family, and like I love hearing, oh my gosh, I started following you when you had your first son, and that was back in 2012, and I started sharing stuff about him when he was like 3 or 4. So that to me speaks volumes and makes me feel really good. It makes me feel like that's what motivates me to create content. Um, but some people love the opposite, right? They are energized off the fact that they can hit like viral videos or things that are hitting quick and fast and staying with trends. Um, so I think it's just again strategy, like figuring out what works for you.
Yeah, I love it. I think what gets misunderstood a lot with mom content is like, okay, you're going to talk about like the struggles of being a mom, or especially like in
Mm-hmm.
male-dominated industries, it's hard for them to understand that we're so multifaceted and there's so many different things that we can talk about, right?
Yeah.
And personally, for me, like I'm not a mom yet, but even I save videos that talk about mom content of like how to save extra time while,
Yeah.
you have a newborn. And I'm like, I'm gonna need this eventually.
Right.
So I save it myself. Like even for people who don't have children, will watch those videos and find it useful as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so many things that we can learn from moms who are just, excelling in their career, but also raising children, and doing it so successfully. So it's amazing that you were able to kind of find this niche and just provide so much valuable content in that space.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's been fun, and I think it's a journey too. I think you have to be really comfortable with
Mhm.
changing too. It's like what content spoke to people 5 years ago is definitely not going to necessarily speak to that same audience or new growing audience now, right? So it's like evolving and being comfortable with that and embracing changes, but also at that same time really staying true to yourself. I mean, speaking of you kind of hit something when you said that you'll save content that moms make and stuff. It was interesting because I recently went to we got to celebrate Diwali at the White House, which was really awesome. And the Surgeon General was talking about how like mental health, it's like there's a crisis for kids, but there's also for parents because of the things that they see on social media and how sometimes there's this idea of what I should be doing. And these parents are showing like, and here, follow me in a day of my life, right? And they're getting so much done in a day, and their kids are doing this, and they're so successful, and so it really made me think about how I also approach my content, which I, yes, I think there's every part of social media a little bit has an aspirational aspect to it, right? I think it's why people come to your page. Um, and even if it's aspirational because you're super funny, right? It's like keeping up with that, staying that funny is what you might need to do. But I really always try to take into account too that like you're giving advice that doesn't make people feel less than, or like it's more motivational, or it's something that makes them feel like I'm seen. I'm feeling seen versus like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Which was really important to me because I remember I saw that and I was like, you know, it's so true. It's like I feel like parents are going through this crisis too of like having this mindset of like, I can't go on social media because I will doom scroll and then I'm realizing that I'm not doing enough. And it's like, no, 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 you are. We just got to have that balance of people that are creating that kind of content and that are also creating like the practical content.
Right, absolutely. I think there's a fine line between maybe like parents who are creating content that is just purely like, oh, I'm very successful. I'm raising my child with no problems, right? But then I feel
Mm-hmm.
like with your content, Ami, you are so authentic and you are sharing practical tips that moms and parents can take away with them. And it's actually helpful, you know? And so there's definitely a big difference there, or whereas, you know, you're providing valuable content where you can help other people rather than just kind of providing content where it's like, oh, I'm living this like amazing life, you know. There's
Right.
definitely a fine line there. So yeah, just love how authentic your content is, just very helpful and just provides just valuable resources for parents.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Of course, yeah. So you talked about family and kind of creating this family within your audience. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing that you recognize the lack of representation for South Asians in the media and beauty industry. And now you used your platform to amplify underrepresented voices and showcase diversity. As you know, this podcast is in partnership with Meta Prosper, and Meta's apps are social platforms where creators can build community and connect with their audiences. So, how do you feel that you have connected more deeply with your audience on Meta platforms?
Gosh, I mean, in so many ways. I think one of the things that Meta has done specifically, I remember you guys started like the diversity program with um for OPI specifically, a conference like at the Meta building. And I remember that panel was so great because I was given the opportunity to meet so many different people, creators, subscribers, whatever it might be in that world from all angles of it, right? Like if they're photographers, um, script writers, whatever it might be. But like having knowing that there's so many other people that are similar to you and have similar backgrounds was really nice to see. And that was more recent. But I think what I am just astounded by on a regular basis and the reach of like Instagram specifically too is like how crazy it is that the world is so large, but it's still so small. You know, it's like someone, I mean, I went to India this past winter and I could not believe like being at the airport and someone being like, "Oh my God, I follow you on Instagram." And they're like, "But I'm from South Africa." And I remember I was like, "What?" Like it was so amazing like that this woman came up to me, you know, as I'm like in Jaipur and she's like, "I have to just tell you that I follow you. And if anytime you're in South Africa, let me know. Like I will come." And she was this Indian woman. And I was like, "Oh my God, this just made me feel so good that I'm connecting with people across the globe. And then we're also connecting together in a whole different place." That was really amazing. And I think also not only I think the cultural aspect of it is amazing. Like I'm meeting so many other women and men and young women, especially within the Asian diaspora that are like, you know, you I save your content because it's something like I think about when I'm in my 40s or I'm a mom, I want to be like this or I want to kind of emulate that. So I feel like it's this community of people ranging from different age groups too, which is great. You know, I have like the 20 somethings that are like asking questions about like, so what did you do then when you were in your 30s, trying to figure out how many kids you were going to have? And when did you decide that? And so it's like they're kind of thinking about that. And so that's why they follow me. And then I have like 30-year-olds that are in it and they're like, so what were you doing when you had two kids under two and like still trying to have a life outside of that? And then now I have this amazing community of over 40-year-olds that are like, okay, now I think I'm ready to either prioritize myself a little bit more. And I'm also figuring out like these teenage years, which is, you know, I don't think anybody tells you until you're actually going through this, the hardest part of all of it, you know, being a parent, because you're like, gosh, these people have feelings and emotions and everything going on that um, it's just a new stage of life. So it's so awesome to see the connection, not only culturally, but community wise. And it's the like mindedness and of what your content can bring, how it can bring people together. It's astounding. Like I was blown away by that. I think especially just that happening over Christmas. I was like, what? This is so crazy. It was really cool.
Amazing. Yeah, especially I think when you showcase your personality and your personal life and making sure that you're connecting with your audience, it creates this like very relatable connection, right? And they're able to kind of relate to your where you're at in life right now, your experiences when you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s. And I love that. I love that you're so interactive with your community, and that's really all it is. Like building community is the foundation of having a very successful relationship with the people around you, right? And I think that's what we see in content creators who are very successful is like when they're connecting, when they're commenting, when they're engaging with their community and their followers. I think that's something that is very precious in a lot of creators.
I agree.
So I love that in a world where it may feel as if a lot of what we do as women can never feel like enough. You share
Hmm.
parts of your life being unapologetically you that inspire other women as well. Can you share what has been like the most challenging moment for you, especially as a minority woman entrepreneur, and how do you overcome those moments?
So I think there's been a few moments like that. I think when it took me a while to decide to do content creation like full time. And I think it was because of the self-doubt and how I was going to be perceived within the community of what are you doing? Why are you trying to do this? You're 35 years old and you're going to start a career in content creation. You're going to just like show outfits and like show makeup and what are you doing? Why are you not becoming a doctor or a real journalist? Like why are you not doing? And I remember these things would constantly bog me down. And it was obviously with myself that I had to have a lot of time to reflect and be like, I got to grow thick skin. Like nobody else knows what I'm doing except for me. And I know I can do this. And I know that it's something that I want to do and I'm really passionate about. But I think it was also amazing, like having the support system. Like my husband was always like 100% behind me. And I think since I had graduated like college or even before then, I was always working. So it felt really weird. Like, wait, even if I'm contributing a little bit, like not being able to have that, the risk of not providing what I can provide myself. That was a big challenge for me, especially like growing up Asian, right? Like I think monetary success is a big part of like how we define success. And it's like you hear that a lot, like how do you define success? Because you have to identify that before you can make your goals, because that's a big part of it. And I think forever there's always been a monetary aspect of it for me, because for me it was like I'm a South Asian woman that got married when I was 25, and I feel like I have to prove myself to not only myself but my family and my entire community that like, hey, if I need to, I could stand on my own. And how am I going to do that? Well, I have to bring home an insane paycheck so that way they know that I can do this. And I was like, well, okay, but what does that really mean? And why do I care so much? And I think it's this whole, I think in some ways it's like this whole Mel Robbins aspect too. It's like let them, right? Like
Mhm.
I think in it's now that's what we've taken to it. But I think even decades ago, it was one of those things where you just have to like realize like it really doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, behind closed doors, who are you answering to? And that I think is the biggest thing that I had to come to terms with. And it was like, it's me, it's my husband, it's my family, and it's my decision as to what I want to do. And if I'm going to do it, I got to just do it. I can't half ass it. I can't be like, well, I'm just going to dabble in it because it's my passion and I'm going to try and work full time doing something else. I was like, no, if this is what I want to do and I have the opportunity to do it, go full force, try it out. And if after a year it's something that I see that isn't working or it's not picking up the way I thought it was, maybe then I figure out like maybe I'm going to go back to producing or figuring that out. And luckily it was something that, caught on pretty quickly, for me to say like this was a sustainable thing to do outside of making it wasn't just a passion project anymore. It was something that I could say like, okay, this is my career. But I think that was one of the biggest challenges, was figuring out whether or not I was going to full time do content and how I was going to save face while doing it. Like what was going to be my one liner to people, right? Like my tagline when people ask, what do you do? And I was in the community, especially like in the South Asian community. And it's like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
a content creator or I'm a digital influencer. I was like always trying to figure out ways of saying it that sounded more prestigious than like, I'm an influencer, I'm a content creator. And then I was like, you know what? I don't really care. Like it's great. If you want to judge and you want to think that what I do is it's just all fluff and I'm basically living off my husband. No problem. Go ahead and think what you want to think because I know who I am. I know
Mhm.
what I do, and everybody that knows me and the stuff I do and put out there, you know, I sleep well at night.
Oh, I love that. I feel like that like pulled on my heartstrings a lot, and I think a lot of Asian women also feel the same, in a world where it's like a lot of industries are male dominated and um it's easier for men to have higher salaries as well.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us as women, we tend to feel like, how do I just take care of myself? How do I make sure that I'm making enough income to provide for myself, right? And how
right.
do I make my family proud? How do I make my friends, understand that I'm doing well, right? And
Yeah,
there's just so many expectations of us that we tend to feel like, okay, I have to make a name for myself and make sure that people know that I have a prestigious title, right? But honestly, like all of that doesn't matter when you recognize who you're doing it for, yourself, your family, your loved ones, right? And those are the people who don't care what your title is. Those are the people who don't care what you do, as long as you're happy and you love doing what you do, right?
it's a
Uh,
100%. Like
yeah,
exactly. There's that, when you come across those memes, those inspirational memes. And then it's like at the end of the day, when you're 90 years old, what's the things that people are going to say they remember? It's
right,
not the car you drove, it's not the job that you had, but it's like how you as a person treated other people, how you made them feel, what you
mhm,
brought to the table as an actual human being, right? And I mean, obviously, there is that practical aspect of it where it's like you have to have the monetary success to feel comfortable and to be able to provide and do those things. So I'm not doubting that, right? And I'm not saying that that's not something that's super important. I do think for me too to come to where I have in my career too, I have had to felt like I can support myself in this, and that helps me feel validated and it helps me feel like more motivation and gives me the confidence to like pursue even more. But I do think that you also, like you just said, you just have to come to terms with it doesn't matter. Like if we're doing what we're doing and we know at the end of the day what we're doing, that's all that matters, and don't have to prove it to
yeah,
anybody else. You know what I mean? And again,
absolutely.
we sleep well at night, right? Like that to me is the
Yes,
biggest thing too, especially because in this career as well, I feel like in this field and in any field, I feel like there's so many people in the Asian community, for me within the South Asian community, I think because there has been that scarcity mindset too for so long,
mhm,
you see a lot of people kind of pinning themselves against each other or like for optics purposes, everybody's really kumbaya and friendly, but behind the scenes they're not. And it's like stepping on each other, not collaborating. And I've always led with this idea of you have to hold your hand out to the person behind you because otherwise, what are we doing this for, right? Like,
right,
why am I making a big splash and helping provide tips and tricks and all these things for what I do if I don't want to see the generation behind me
right,
succeed, right? Same for you. Why would you be putting all this time and effort into this amazing platform that you guys have started and you see how much attention and what a community it's garnered, right? It's the same thing. It's like at the end of the day, we do want to do that because we want to see this grow even bigger than we are eventually,
right.
right? And and it's interesting because I remember during COVID, I was so happy to see because so many people, as unfortunate of a time as it was, people ended up redirecting what their passions and their careers were, right?
Mhm.
Especially many within the Asian community. I mean, I don't think I saw such a surge in content creators within especially beauty, lifestyle, cooking, finance, right? Like taking their expertise and creating content out of that. And it made me so happy. I remember at that, I was like, I feel like I'm a proud, like, big sister or mom. Like, it made me so happy to see people that thought that they had to be literally in this industry of finance or like, no, I have to be I'm gonna do this forever. I'm gonna be a banker. And they're like, actually, I get ready now talking about my banking career and tips, sharing tips while I'm getting ready. And that's how I make money. I mean, it's just amazing, right? And to see that now, 5 years later, from when that started, and you see the big boom in that. I'm sure you've seen it too, right? Within the
Right.
community, how that's happened. It's amazing to see. So
Absolutely. I feel like I'm getting like big sister mom advice tips on this podcast right now, so I'm loving
I
it.
love that. I love that because I feel like that's been my sort of angle in the last couple of years has definitely been more about, positioning as like the big sister and kind of really being there for people who are either need advice or wanting to come and ask like, well, what did you do for this? Whether it be for mom or content creation or whatever it is. So I love that you just said that. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. So we're nearing the end of the podcast, Ami. So I have a few final questions for you.
Yes.
What are your future plans that you can share with us?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. So I think for a long time, I had always thought that the end goal for me was going to be creating some sort of line and it was going to revolve around beauty. And it just the way it started for me with doing things efficiently and quick, it was going to be around that. Like, I'm going to create a line. It's going to be like the 5 things you need to get ready super fast, and that's going to be it. And then as time has evolved, I've realized like one, the beauty space is so saturated. And even as someone that gets to review products on a daily basis, it's a lot. And I realized too that unless you're a big name and unless you have the right timing, all of it together, there are so many amazing brands that are out there that just don't have the platform or the voice to actually be discovered because it's just there's too much right now, right? Um, and so through that, I think one of my biggest things, again, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, like being the big sister or mom thing, I love educating people. And I think one of my biggest things has always been around like doing hair and makeup, which I did have a business doing like South Asian weddings for a couple of years. And through that, it's almost like still doing that, but maybe more live. And I started doing that with my school, like my kids' schools. I do it for a fundraiser and I take moms and I'll do like these looks and, we'll have a night and it's just like, let's get ready really quick. And I do a whole masterclass with them, right? And it's great for them because these are busy moms that don't have the time to actually spend on themselves. But what I realized and what I think I really want to bridge is like, how do we teach our young girls or boys and moms, right? Like I love that aspect of bringing them both together. And because I see the 12-year-olds at Sephora, shopping and using the crazy acids that they shouldn't be using. And then I see the moms that are like, they're asking for the allowance. I'm giving it to them because I don't know what else to do. I want to connect with them, but like they shouldn't be using this product and XYZ. And I'm like, how amazing would that be if I could figure out a way where we are educating, like bringing together moms and daughters, and we're doing a class on skincare or like, makeup 101. Let's get ready for prom and we can show like a simple look and mom can be there too because she's helping, or even if anything, just being there and then connecting on that together. You know what I mean? And same thing with boys. Like I think one of the biggest things with teen boys is like body care, breakouts, all those things that we might be uncomfortable to talk about, but it's like it's inevitable and we should have that. We have so much access to it and we have so many products out there. So I think it's really about the education thing. So I have been like scheming and I have all of these ideas, but I really think I kind of want it to be somewhere where I am as a mom right now and a parent, which is like in the next couple of years, I'm going to be raising full teenagers. So I feel like something around that in that space is what I would love to do, but in a long-winded way. That's where
I
I see
love
myself.
it. I love it. I love it. I feel like teenagers nowadays, they'll just like get the most like trendiest thing at Sephora because they see all their friends getting it, but they don't know if it even like works with their skin type, right? So
I know.
definitely the education piece of it is very important.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for all of the future plans that you have. I have one final question for you,
Yes.
Ami, and that is, what is one advice that you can share with aspiring entrepreneurs or content creators who are looking to get started?
Okay, so I think number one piece of advice is always like, don't even think about it, just start, right? I think we hear that all the time. But I think one of the other things that I take, and I say this all the time when people ask me, is, the comparing, like you can respect, you can admire, you can love what other people are doing and how they're doing it without doubting yourself and without questioning your own worth and what you bring to the table. And I think that's been the biggest piece of advice for that I give to people because it's something I've come across too. Like I'll look at someone that is doing similar things to me and I'm like, gosh, but like they're so much better than I am, or like they're putting out content way faster than I am, or they're younger than I am, or like their engagement is that much higher, right? I don't have to look at that and compare myself and say, well, then I shouldn't be doing it. I should just be using that as inspiration and using it as ways that I can take from them and say, okay, let me apply little things that maybe they do that I think is similar to me and use that to my advantage. Or also take that and realize that we are all authentic and we all have our own unique voices, that there's a reason why people are coming to your page, or there's a reason why people are asking you for certain things. And remember that to like build your confidence, revalidate yourself, and really just the way we would in real life, surround ourselves with people that we want to be around and learn from. Do that within your community too. You know what I mean? In your online community. Like, don't seek out things that you think are what you should be looking at, like the really nice fashion stuff or this, or like the diet pages or whatever it might be. Like, do surround yourself with the really good people that reflect who you are. So that way you are being fed that content too. You know what I mean? I think we have to actively do that ourselves, because it's important that the stuff we're even doom scrolling without thinking is coming to us. And it is the stuff that we should be seeing and that we want to see, versus just stuff that like, yeah, I want to be skinny, or yeah, I want to do this, or yeah, I want to have clear skin, or I want to do this. It's like, I really try actively thinking about like going to pages where I can learn about education or like certain things about kids or healthy habits, and like, exercise is not just about looking good, it's about feeling good and all those kinds of things, but so it's really about being conscious that you're surrounding yourself with good people online and in real life, and also not comparing yourself to other people.
Absolutely. That is amazing and sound advice. Thank you so much, Ami.
Of course.
And where can our listeners find you on Meta platforms?
You can find me at Ami Desai on Instagram.
Amazing. We'll add that in the show notes. Ami, it was amazing having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me.